welcome again. I have the amazing Rachel with us today, and we are going to talk about what it's been like since the release of Rooted to Rise and becoming a number one bestseller and all the feelings that come up with like writing a chapter, writing a book, and then the after. So you've already seen her before, and now we're going to talk about the after. So thank you so much, Rachel, for joining me today. And just how are you today? How does it feel to have your story out there and all the things?
Well, it's been kind of actually weird, but not weird. Like it's been kind of hard to like put words to the feeling of it because I've wanted to write a book for a long time, but I never thought of myself as a writer. And that's been probably the most like unique thing is like having to update bios, having to update websites, having to update all the things that you do. And like even my son the other day was talking and somebody said something about, well, yeah, his mom does this, and he goes, no, she's a writer now too. And I was like it was just that like I don't know. It was just kind of that like startling effect, like, oh yeah, yeah, I get to say that, type feeling. So it's like it, but you like have to like slowly walk into that like that persona of you, kind of a way. And it's not something I'm used to because it's not been me until now. So, you know.
I love how you said step into it because it really is like there's so many stepping stones to becoming an author, and I think that, I hope I made it super clear from the beginning that the after is filled with all of these other new like feelings, things surface that you are like, no, go away. But please tell me and share with me, have you heard any feedback from your chapter? Has anybody told you anything in terms of like they've read it and it's impacted their life? Or because that's the whole reason why we wrote this book, right? And it's not necessarily to always hear the feedback, but that's always nice to know if somebody is brave enough to come to us. So has that happened for you?
Well, there's actually two that kind of are really pivotal to me. I'm having trouble with words today. Pivotal that like made an impact back at me. And one was my son, my oldest son. He picked up the book one day. Like they've looked at it, they know like they've lived life with me. So they like know glimpses of the story, but like actually having it in print and like me expressing how I lived it. He read it and he was like, Mom, I didn't realize like you went through that. Like he was like, I was there, but I didn't like realize the effect that it had on you. And so that's been kind of interesting because it's put a new like dynamic in our relationship. And I mean, we're fairly close anyways, but it was just one of those things like he got to see a part of me that he probably wouldn't have understood unless he read it that way. Like I could have told it, but it probably would have been abbreviated. I probably would have redacted things just to like save him knowing certain things. And so that was kind of interesting. And he's dropped little bits as we've talked even since then. Like how did that happen? Like, and asking the questions. And so that was very important. And then yesterday I had like kind of a bombshell with it was a great bombshell. And it was a friend of mine who's had the book and she's got some health issues and she's been kind of holding off reading the book for whatever reason it was. But I told her I said it was serendipity because she was getting some reports very similar to my story. And she read that and we've been talking back and forth since she has had these things, health issues going on. But she's not been always asking the right questions of me. So it was one of those things like I was cautious in what I told her because I took a very alternative route to how I healed. And so when she was asking me questions after she got her information of that she had some potential health issues like I did, she was like very much wanting the information because she's like, I felt like I read it at the right time because I got the call right after that. These things were happening. And she's like, I think I would have had a different frame of mind if I'd have got the call without reading the chapter. And she was like, because I knew somebody had already walked through it before I had, and so there would be somebody I could talk to. And that I didn't have any intention of that when I wrote that chapter, but as I told her, I said it was serendipity. I mean, because we've only known each other for like a month.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, like we met through our kids and things like that. So it's been one of those things like we just met, we connected, we've just kind of been chit-chatting, and she was actually interested in something else that I had mentioned that was not related to the book, and that's kind of how we connected. And then she found out about the book, and she was the first one that bought it, like the physical copy. And so it was one of those things like it had been sitting there, and I was like, no, it sat there until the right time that it needed to talk to you and that you needed it when you needed it. And so that if no one ever, which I hope people read the chapter, but if no one ever else reads the chapter, it was worth it for just
And it's that one person, and
yeah.
that one person just seems to be that story you're going to remember forever. And I
Mhm.
love that. And this completely leads me into 2 points in your chapter that just like really just bam, like, and maybe she had those moments, but the first one, and they kind of tie in together. So I wanted to read part of it. You say, every morning I woke up feeling like I was at war with my own body, unsure of what new challenge the day would bring. And I know a lot of people can relate to this, not even having the same story, the same symptoms, the same diagnoses, the same everything,
Mhm.
especially women. So I'm going to like point that out. A lot of women, whether it's physical or mental,
Mhm.
um, a lot of times we wake up and we go, how am I going to keep going? What
Mhm.
else is going to hit me? I know there's like this thing called the spoon theory. Like, how many spoons do you wake up with, and how many spoons are do you lose like as you do things, certain things?
Mhm.
Like, even with chronic illness, you go and take a shower, you lose like 3 spoons, whereas a normal person may not lose any spoons.
Right.
And so that like really stood out to me. And I would love for you to talk about that a little bit deeper, but I want to add the second part that will go with it. And you said, determined to get to the bottom of this, I began to dive deeper into the emotional and spiritual aspects of healing. I revisited every symptom, and I want to pause there. I'm going to keep reading the rest of it. But what did it mean for you to revisit every symptom? There's 3 parts. So but this was huge for me. So what did that mean? I revisited every symptom.
Well, I'm going to preface something for our listeners because you know this about me, but not all listeners may know this about me. I spent 21 years in the medical field. So symptoms were surface treatments a lot of times. So we went and we treated just the symptom, not necessarily the cause of the symptom. And so when I started down this alternative route to healing, as I call it, I had to in a way like start pulling back a lot of my own layers of my own knowledge and my own thinking and my own processes because everything was very surface oriented. It was very like quick fixes, new routines, new self-care. I just wrote something about that yesterday, which was blew my mind because like I was all into that. Like I was all into the new quick fix thing, the new fad diets, the new everything. Anything that came across my desk, I was for those 21 years, I was like digesting it and I was like doing it and experimenting with it. But when I switched my idea of how I was going to heal myself, I had to throw all that out the window. Like I really did. And I had to come into everything with kind of a new framework of how I was going to look at it and how I was going to process it because I couldn't just look at the symptom. I had to look at the source. And so getting to that source can take time. And for some people, they can push that. And I was one of those people that like I pushed that very early on in my healing process. Not everybody it has that ability. And I don't advise that, honestly, because physically I continued to have a lot of symptoms come up because I was pushing myself emotionally kind of too fast in a way. But I had the support systems that I needed to do that. And I wanted to do it quickly. but there's still things that I'm working through. And like the book was one of those things that really brought a lot of those things, like even that I had worked through, I was having other things that were kind of not triggering, but like they would just kind of bubble. Like you would start to feel, oh my, and it was one of those things like sometimes I would feel, because you or James would say, it was usually James, because he was the one that was editing the work, and he would come back and he's like, I don't like this. This is not you. And that was really hard to take because I had this public persona of the nurse and this thinker and everything was logical. And he made me really get into the emotions of it. And that was what I was writing about. And he was like, no, this is not emotional enough. And it still was one of those things like I didn't feel triggered, but it was just some of those underlying emotions that I had that were still bubbling, started bubbling faster again. And so I really had to take time to look at what was the source of those things. And oftentimes finding the source is like detective work in a way, because you think you know what it is, but you really don't. Like once you start pulling back the layers of like an onion and you pull it back and you think, oh, I've got it. And then you realize, no, you don't.
Hmm.
Like you pull the next layer back and you're like, oh, wait a second, that's connected to that. And it really was, to me, it was very connected. And I thought, oh, I was mad at this person. It really wasn't that person. It was like another person because you got like you had to go ask questions or you had to go find backstories because the narrative that you were told was only from one vantage point. And sometimes when you asked another person and they gave you a different vantage point, or they were like, no, that person didn't say that, this person did. And that was the thing that caused you to think that about yourself for so many years. You're like, oh, I've been mad at the wrong person for 20 years. That's hard to like emotionally hard to take when you start uncovering that. And
Hmm.
so those two segments that you were talking about, that's really what that was. It was me like really sitting and marinating with those emotions and going, were these mine or were these given to me? Like, somebody saying something to me. And was that really that person? Or did I just assume? Or did I have my own perceptions? And I really had to change that. And especially about how healing worked for me. And so kind of all of that accumulated to that, you know, that process for me.
Yeah, exactly. And that touched on the other three, every emotion and every unresolved trauma. And you said it was a painful and enlightening journey that changed my beliefs and pushed me to confront parts of myself I had long buried. And with that, I want to ask, had you ever confronted those before? Or was this a brand new thing that you were talking about?
No, it was absolutely brand new because um, I mean, I had been in medicine and I had been in religion. We'll go there. I wasn't really thinking about going there today, but I had been in religion, like a very conservative, confined religion for so long that the narrative was pretty set for you. And there was certain things that you did or you didn't do. So like having a mental illness or having depression or anything like that, like pray it away. Like that was what I was told for years and years and years. And I was like, there was not enough praying that I could do to pray away some of the things that I was thinking and feeling and the emotions I had. So taking those things and having to look at them honestly and go, are they things that I believe or are they things that I was told to believe? Or are they things that I do believe, but maybe not in the same way that I did before? And so a lot of that I had to really like just sit with and write about and talk to people about. And like it was really learning if it was me or if it was a thought process that was given to me. Did I own that feeling? Did I own that emotion? Did I own that belief system? And for me, a lot of that I had to, um, in a way, work through that and then rebuild who I really wanted to be because a lot of it was prefabbed for me. And it was all logical, it was not heartfelt. And that was, that logical piece for many, especially many women. Sometimes we get into the logic because we can't deal with the heart stuff or
Mhm.
we don't want to
Or
because
we're
we've been
not given permission to.
or we're not told to, or we're not told that we're allowed to, or that permission piece, and you are. So if you've never heard that from anybody, you are allowed to deal with that stuff. You're allowed to be emotional. We are emotional beings. We are designed that way. And if we're not, we're affecting everybody around us because we're not being that emotional pillar that we're supposed to be. And many of us, especially Gen X women, which is where most of what I work with, they don't deal with emotions. They don't want to. Like they've never been able to. And so there's this really big need, in my opinion. And I felt like for me, I know I had to go through that process. I had to live the life prior to that to have the life that I have now and go through those things. That's part of my journey. That's part of my contract. I mean, it's part of everything that now I understand. Like I had to go through all that to have that health crisis in order to unpackage all that stuff to create who I needed to be.
Mhm. Yeah. Your chapter is so powerful. All of the chapters are powerful in their own right.
Mhm.
I feel like yours can uh, touch the masses. There's so
Mm.
many parts to your chapter that people can mirror and see themselves, that they can use things that you shared and apply them to their own life. And I think that overall, just like having the bravery, I want to honor you right now, having the bravery to share this because in an anthology, really eating a book, because I just finished my own book myself, and all the details never get in there. Yeah, I mean, you can write for years and more details are going to come up over and over and over again, but the snapshot of into everyone's stories with this is so important so that people give themselves permission to create snapshots for themselves, not even having to be, like writing it or being a part of a book, but just honoring yourself and sitting with your own snapshots.
Mhm.
And because, if there's something, let's say you're in your 40s or your 50s, if something surfaces, there's no way you're going to be able to unravel all the parts because it took 40 to 50 years to get there, and I think it's kind of that comparison where like people say, you're pregnant for 9, 10 months, it's going to take your body at least 9, 10 months to recover from that.
Mhm.
And I think that that's something that's never talked about in therapy ever. It's never talked about in churches ever. It's never talked about in communities ever. And it's like, well, I just need to hurry up and fix myself. I need to hurry up and process this. I need to hurry up and, all the things. And we feel like there's just so much opportunity with this that, we talk about CBD, and that
Mhm.
was a tool.
Mhm.
It wasn't a cure. It wasn't the do all end all. It wasn't anything. And what led us a lot to CBD was already getting to those breaking points and saying, I need a tool. And
Mhm.
that's really, I feel, what this is all about. And, even the covering of itself, it's got an ambiguous picture of 7 women with
Mhm.
light and in a field. And I think what I love about this cover in particular is it's you can see yourself as one of these people. Even if you're a man, you can see yourself in community. And I feel like that's really what it's all about. And the title in itself, like Rooted to Rise, we can't rise until we deal with our roots. And
Mhm.
some of those roots are so rotten and so intertwined with the healthy ones that it's up to us to like go in there and extract
Mhm.
to a sense of the unhealthy roots. And your chapter, like, there's just no way to avoid the fact that that's exactly what you did. And
Well, I'm
like,
going to go back and touch on a couple of things you said because you said that's not talked about in these places yet. Because I believe that there's change coming that even if I'm having to be the one to do it, which that may be that is something in the work. because I think that we do have to be in community. I think we do have to be in a space where we can talk about these things. And personally, I'm creating my own space with people to do this because we do need to talk about that because we don't need to be fixed. Like that part of therapy, coaching, all that, you don't need to be fixed. You just need to understand who you were and get back to that. So the journey is part of the um the messiness. Like it is messy. And like honoring the fact that you went through that mess, you went through that rotting sometimes, for me there was quite a bit of like root rot as I call it. And like it's like a plant because when you plant a plant, sometimes the roots will rot and you have to go dig the entire plant out, cut those roots out, put the plant right back in where you had it and then grow again. And that's what many of us are not doing. We're just like planting ourselves somewhere else with the same root rot and we're not clipping those roots and we're not getting back to that. And when we picked the title of the book, I thought so much about plants. Obviously, you can tell by my background, like the plant analogy, because that is so true. Because where we're planted is where we're planted. And many of us want to fix what's being, planted around us or blame what's planted around us, or we just want to pick up and move to a new place and we don't fix those roots. And it's not fixing anything. So let me clarify my own wording. It's not fixing anything. It's taking what we know and becoming aware of who we really are supposed to be. Because many of us know that at our core. There's not many women that I talk to that they don't know who they truly are in their essence. They just don't know how to get back to that essence.
Exactly.
Because there's so many things standing in the way, so many obligations, so many paradigms and things like that constructs that we put around ourselves. We know what we should be doing, but we don't know how to get back to that. And that's for me what I'm doing in my own life, but with the people around me, I'm trying to help them understand that they don't need to be fixed. They already know what to do. They just got to remember how to do it. Because in a way it's easy, but you got to get through all of the stuff to get to that. And yeah, that's what a lot of us don't want to do is we don't want to go through and flip those roots and take care of that stuff because we've been told not to.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yep. There's a lot to that. We talked
So
about
that's a whole like podcast series.
yeah, you and I could go on for days about all of that. So I really appreciate this. Now, one of the things that Wildly Free wants to honor, especially the publish or the authors of anthologies, and this is something that isn't common, but we made each and every person an author. Now, what does that mean? It means that you get registered in the Library of Congress. When you search up your name on certain things, it comes up. A lot of other publishers seem to just focus on the person who curated the book itself as the only author, but books wouldn't be possible without all the chapters. And that's, you can relate that to just life in and of itself. And so I want to honor the fact that, you guys are authors. This is your journey, and by doing that I want you to tell everyone how can they get the book from you directly.
Just go to my website, rachelwoosley.com, and you'll find I think it's under resources or tools tab, the book's underneath there. So you can go right there and order it that way. So if you need spelling of my name, it's on the screen or in the bio.
Very strategic. I love that. And I would love to spend the next couple of minutes just if there is anything else that's on your heart or on your mind, I would love to honor that in these last few minutes of our time together on this podcast.
Well, first off, I appreciate Rochelle and James so much. One,
Aww.
because Rochelle's name and mine are like so similar. It's so fun. But just that they were willing to step out and create an anthology like this because, as far as we know, there's not one like it. And it's a brave thing because we're talking about a topic that is still very stigmatized among women, especially. And so stepping out and telling our stories in this manner, and using the plant as our connecting point was new and innovative and challenging at times because there were some challenging things that we faced with it, and those are all just part of the journey of publishing. So if you're in that space, you probably already know that. But if you're not, um, it's one of those things, in my opinion, like I think everybody should write their story. Not everybody's going to do it because some of y'all aren't brave enough, and I'm just going to say that. And here my kids are knocking in the background, but some people are just not brave enough to do that. And I encourage those people who know that they need to do that to do it. Like just step out, contact Rochelle, and just do it because um, as I said, like she gave us this like survey thing afterwards, and it was so funny because I was sitting and I was looking at it and I was like, do I really want to answer this question? And it was the question like I think it was something to the effect like, was there anything that we did that you didn't like? And I was like, well, there was a lot of things that I didn't like, but it was more because you made me upset about myself. And actual like the process, it was like more just pushing me out of my comfort zone. And Rochelle kind of
Lovingly though.
lovingly. And yes, it was very like Rochelle kind of has her own flow to things, and I'm still like very logical about things. And I'm like, I needed organization in a certain way, and I wasn't getting it. And I knew that I didn't need it, but I wanted it type feeling. And she was not going to give it. And and I honor and I respect her for that because like it was really difficult for me because I would get frustrated with my own self because I was like I was pushing a process that needed to flow. And if it wouldn't have been for her like putting the brakes on things at times or not doing things at a certain pace that I wanted it done, it made me like really sit back and honor that kind of flow state. And that's been one of those things for me that I've constantly had to work on. And so stepping into this process will definitely push your buttons. So I'm not going to say it won't, but the buttons that it pushes are oftentimes not the ones that you expect. And so that was the fun process for me anyways. I found it as a learning process. And I think if people go into it with that mindset, that learning process, now I write almost every day. I write a blog, I write a newsletter,
I love it.
writing. I'm writing, like, I already have the outline of a second book, which we'll talk about at a later date. We've been talking about a fantasy book that I've been writing for years just for fun. And she's like, why don't we publish it? And I'm like, it was like, and I would have never thought of publishing. It was just for fun for me, my own. And she's like, no, we need. So those types of things come out of this, and you never know what you're going to do out of this process of telling your story and putting it in black and white forever,
Mhm.
because it's there forever,
Forever.
you know, and you can't take it back. Like you can't hide behind it anymore. And so many women hide behind their stories. We do. Like we hide behind our victimhood, or we hide behind our trauma, or we hide behind our loved ones, or we hide behind, this persona that we've created within our stories, and we hide there. And when you can't hide there anymore, it makes all of those instances where you want to feel really strange. And that's been a big process for me in this book because now I'm kind of like, oh, I can't hide behind that anymore.
I'm glad you can't hide anymore because you have so much to offer. You have already offered the world so much. I know personally, you've offered me so much. You've been such a huge light in my life. And so I just want to thank you immensely for being you, being a part of the book, saying yes, uh, doing it scared, and walking it out with me. And I am 100% sure this isn't our last book together. So thank you so, so much, Rachel. I really appreciate all this time. And for everyone who's listening, thank you for taking the time to receive all of these wonderful nuggets that Rachel always shares in every podcast she's ever a part of. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.